In the later stages of World War II, Germany faced a dire situation. Severe shortages of resources, crippling Allied air raids on industrial centers, and the continuous loss of territory made defeat appear increasingly certain. In a desperate attempt to prolong the war effort, the German military began prioritizing more cost-effective designs that could mount powerful guns on readily available and inexpensive chassis. As part of this shift in strategy, manufacturers were encouraged to repurpose existing tank chassis and components. One such proposal came from Krupp, a major player in the German armaments production. The company suggested mounting the advanced Schmalturm turret, originally developed for the Panther Ausf, onto the older but widely available Panzer IV chassis. However, the proposal was denied and the vehicle was never built, which was probably for the best. Welcome, tank enthusiasts! I'm Michael, also known as Bulldog, the lead developer of Steel Aces, an upcoming tactical vehicle shooter focused on historically authentic tank-on-tank combat. I've been a long-time fan of Tanks Encyclopedia, and it's a real honor to be your host today. Steel Aces is a passion project born from the current state of tank games on the market. No more pay-to-win, no gambling mechanics, no special ammo. A back to the roots of pure, grounded armored warfare where positioning, tactics and historical details matter. No planes, no artillery, just you, your tank and the fight ahead. With that aside, let's dive into today's article. Before we examine the Panzer IV fitted with a Schmalturm turret, let us revisit the origins of its two main components, starting with the hull donor, the Panzerkampfwagen IV medium tank. The development of Germany's medium tanks began in the early 1930s with two parallel concepts. The first was the Zugführerwagen, or platoon leader vehicle, intended to engage enemy armor with a 3.7 cm anti-tank gun. The second was the Begleitwagen, or escort vehicle, designed to accompany infantry and other tanks, equipped with a 7.5 cm gun intended to fire high explosive rounds against bunkers, anti-tank guns and fortified positions. This division of roles was meant to ensure complementary firepower between the two tanks, which would in due time evolve into a Panzer III and a Panzer IV. Following a series of prototypes, production of the first Panzer IV variant, the Ausführung A, began in 1937. At the time, it was a modern design introducing several design features that would continue to define later versions. These included a 3-man turret, a commander's cupola, and large escape hatches, all of which improved crew efficiency and survivability. Each tank also came equipped with a radio and a dedicated radio operator, offering a notable advantage in battlefield coordination over the Allied tanks. The Ausführung A's main armament was the short-barreled 7.5 cm KwK 37L24, adequate for both infantry support and anti-tank work. The tank was relatively fast and mobile, but its armor, just 14.5mm at its thickest, was already considered insufficient by the late 1930s standards. Only 35 units of the Ausführung A were built. However, it provided German designers and engineers with valuable experience that would inform the development of the more capable Panzer IV variants to come. In October 1937, Krupp was ordered to improve the Panzer IV's frontal armor to withstand 20mm armor-piercing rounds and to install a more powerful Maybach HL120TR engine, delivering 265 horsepower. These changes resulted in a limited production run of the second model, the Ausführung B. The following variants, Ausführung C, D and E, introduced only minor improvements, such as changes to the front hull's shape and the return of the bow machine gun, while retaining much of the layout and design of their predecessors. More significant changes arrived with the Panzer IV Ausführung F, which featured a straight, single-piece 50mm front armor plate, a design that would become standard in later models. The Ausführung F was also the last version to mount the short-barreled 7.5 cm KwK 37L24 gun. In response to the formidable Soviet T-34 and KV tanks, the Germans began upgrading the Ausführung F with a 7.5 cm KwK 40L43 gun in early 1942, significantly increasing the tank's anti-tank capabilities. These improved tanks were designated Ausführung F2, while the short-barreled ones were retroactively named Ausführung F1. From July 1942, the F2 was redesignated as the Ausführung G, which eventually adopted the longer KwK 40L48 gun and an 80mm thick frontal plate in later production batches. The next variant, the Ausführung H, was originally intended to be a major overhaul. Plans included sloped frontal armor, a newly redesigned turret, and a revised suspension with 6 large road wheels. However, none of these ambitious changes made it into production. In practice, the Ausführung H was very similar to the G model, retaining the KwK 40L48 gun and adding Schützen or side skirts as standard. The final variant, the Ausführung J, was a simplified version built under wartime duress. Intended to streamline production amid bombing raids, labor shortages and material scarcity, it featured no major technical improvements and was effectively a downgraded Ausführung H, focused on ease of manufacture rather than combat performance. The Schmalturm, which in German stands for narrow turret, was an advanced turret design originally worked on by the armaments manufacturer Rheinmetall. After their prototype failed to meet expectations, the project was transferred to Daimler-Benz in February 1944, and it was at this stage that the name Schmalturm appeared. The new hexagonal design offered significantly improved armor protection. It featured a 150mm thick conical gun mantlet, leading to a flat 120mm frontal plate. The turret sides, which were 60mm thick, were angled outward to increase effective resistance against incoming fire. Despite the turret's more compact external profile, the internal volume remained unchanged, and the standard 1650mm turret ring diameter used on all Panthers was retained. Several modernizations were introduced with the Schmalturm. The turret was designed to be compatible with infrared night vision equipment, and the older Maschinengewehr 34 coaxial machine gun was replaced by the more advanced Maschinengewehr 42. Additionally, a stereoscopic rangefinder capable of 15 times magnification and with a field of view of 4 degrees was planned, though none were actually built before the end of the war. Several prototype turrets designated Versuchsschmalturm were mounted on Panther Ausf G chassis for testing. The finalized production model was intended for the Panther Ausf F, which incorporated several other modifications beyond the turret itself. However, by the war's end in 1945, only a handful of Ausf F hulls and Schmalturm turrets were under construction. At least one hybrid vehicle, consisting of an Ausf F hull fitted with a standard Ausf G turret, is known to have participated in the defense of Berlin. After the war, 2 Schmalturm production turrets were recovered by the Allies. One was taken to the United States, while the British acquired the other and used it for ballistic testing. The remains of the British tested turret can still be viewed at the Bovington Tank Museum in the UK. In early September 1943, Waffenprüfamt 6, the German department responsible for the development and testing of ordnance equipment, consulted Krupp on the feasibility of mounting the Panther's 7.5cm KwK 42 L70 gun into the standard Panzer IV turret. Krupp's reply was clear and unequivocal: the integration was not feasible. However, by November 15, 1944, Krupp returned with a set of conceptual design studies aimed at upgunning existing tanks and tank destroyers still in production. This proposal series was titled Umbewaffnung der Panzer, or Weapon Swap of Tanks. Although none of these concepts were ever realized in metal, many were forward-thinking and theoretically sound. Among these designs were 4 new vehicles based on serially produced chassis. First, a Panzer 38T mounting a 7.5cm KwK 40 L48 in a Panzer IV turret. While the document refers to this as a T variant, the vehicle outline actually resembles the 38D chassis. Next, a Panzerjäger 38T mit 7,5 cm KwK 42 L70. This was a tank destroyer featuring a rear-mounted casemate housing the Panther's high-velocity gun. Then a Panzerjäger 4 mit 8,8 cm Pak 43 L71. A tank based on the Panzer IV chassis, also featuring a rear-mounted casemate, but armed with the same gun as the Panzerkampfwagen Tiger Ausführung B, or Tiger II for short. And lastly, Panzerjäger Panther mit 12,8 cm Pak 80 L55, a heavy tank destroyer concept mounting a Pak 80 in a rear casemate on a Panther chassis. Additionally, some sources claim that a similar rear casemate vehicle was proposed on the chassis of the Tiger II, mounting a 12.8 cm KwK L66. However, no official documents or blueprints of this Tiger-based concept have been found to date. Other proposals simply involve upgunning existing vehicles, including a Panther rearmed with a 8.8 cm KwK 43 L71, a Tiger II rearmed with a 10.5 cm KwK L68, a Jagdtiger rearmed with a 12.8cm KwK-L66 in an enlarged casemate, and a Panzer IV rearmed with a 7.5cm KwK-42L70 in a Schmalturm turret. On January 20th, 1945, Waffenprüfamt 6 rendered a verdict. The proposals from Krupp are centered on engaging the enemy using the most effective weapon while minimizing the use of armor. Krupp's perspective suggests that the increased weight due to larger weapons should be addressed by relinquishing the idea that panzers should possess sufficient armor to defend against their own weapons' penetration capabilities. The necessity for heavier armament capable of penetrating thick armor must be counterbalanced by providing better, or at least comparable armor protection so that the panzer equipped with its costly gun isn't inherently inferior to adversaries from the outset. These propositions, particularly within the Jagdpanzer sector, imply a significant redesign of the currently produced models, which would result in a considerable disruption to production. Whether this disruption can be justified under the prevailing circumstances should be decided by higher authorities. By that point, the production of the Panzer IV was already scheduled for termination, and as such, none of the rearmament proposals based on its chassis were likely to be pursued further. Theoretically, the modernization with the Schmalturm turret could have been applied to any variant of the Panzer IV. The hull's armor thickness would vary depending on the selected base model. The Panzer IV Ausführung E had 30mm of armor with an additional 30mm applique plate, totaling 60mm. The Ausführung F featured a single 50mm armor plate. Ausführung G had 50mm base armor plus a 30mm applique plate, totaling 80mm, while the Ausführung H and J both shared a single 80mm armor plate. It is worth noting that some sources, mainly associated with a certain video game and its historical information about the tank's origin abstract, propose that the Ausführung J was intended as the base for this design. However, this claim is not substantiated by any known documentation. Krupp's original drawing depicts only a generalized Panzer IV hull and does not specify any particular variant. Still, the idea isn't entirely out of the blue. When Krupp submitted the proposal, the Ausführung J was the most recent model in production, so from that perspective, it would have been a logical choice. On one hand, the Ausführung J was the latest production model at the time Krupp submitted the proposal, making it a logical candidate. Its use would also be more in line with Waffenprüfamt 6's principle that a tank equipped with an expensive gun must not be inherently inferior to its adversaries from the outset. On the other hand, it may have been more practical to refit older, outdated variants instead, while preserving the production of the still capable Ausführung J model intact. Whichever version ultimately mounted the new Schmalturm turret, it would have introduced a host of engineering and operational challenges. The first issue was mechanical compatibility. The Schmalturm was built for the Panther's 1650mm turret ring, whereas the Panzer IV used a slightly larger 1680mm ring. That may seem like a small difference, but in engineering terms it meant significant modifications had to be made to every hull intended for conversion. This would have added time, cost and complexity to what was supposed to be a cost-effective upgrade. The Schmalturm was much heavier than the Panzer IV's original turret, about 7.5 tons versus 3.2. More than double the weight. And keep in mind, late war Panzer IV variants, like the Ausführung H and J, already fitted with 80mm of frontal armor, were operating near the upper limit of what the suspension and drivetrain could reliably handle. Adding several more tons of stress would likely lead to accelerated wear, frequent breakdowns, or even chassis deformation over time. The added turret weight would have also had an impact on mobility. The Panzer IV, even in its earlier forms, had a low power-to-weight ratio, around 11 to 12 horsepower per ton. With the heavier Schmalturm, total vehicle weight would rise to 28 to 29 tons, dropping the power-to-weight ratio even lower. This would result in sluggish acceleration and reduced cross-country performance. The Schmalturm was not only heavier, it was also taller. Raising the turret center of mass meant raising the tank's center of gravity, which would make the vehicle less stable, particularly on slopes or uneven terrain. Another serious issue was turret traverse. By the Ausführung J variant, the Panzer IV had lost its electric turret traverse system, which was removed as a cost-saving measure. Instead, it relied on a simple hand-cranked system using a geared mechanism that the gunner had to operate manually. Trying to rotate a heavier turret like the Schmalturm that way would have been painfully slow, if it could even be done at all. Despite these challenges, the internal crew layout would likely have remained unchanged. Like both the standard Panzer IV and Panther Ausführung F, the vehicle would have retained a 5-man crew. driver and radio operator would be in the front of the hull, while the other three, the commander, gunner, and loader, would have been housed in the turret exactly as they were in the Panther Ausf. The tank was armed with a 7.5cm KwK 42L70, the same gun that would have been mounted on the Panther Ausf compared to the earlier 7.5cm KwK 40 L43 and L48 guns used on the standard Panzer IVs. This weapon had a significantly higher muzzle velocity and far superior armor penetration. However, installing such a gun in the more compact Schmalturm turret was not a simple task. To make it work, the recoil system had to be completely redesigned. This was accomplished through a collaboration between Skoda of Pilsen, located in the German-occupied Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, and Krupp. The result was a modified version of the gun with a more compact recoil mechanism mounted above the barrel, allowing it to fit inside the turret's tighter dimensions. This setup provided a respectable vertical gun movement with 20 degrees of elevation and 8 degrees of depression. Notably, the usual muzzle brake common on most German tanks was removed, likely to simplify the design. One important drawback was ammunition storage. Fitting the long 7.5cm gun into the Schmalturm turret meant using larger shells than the standard Panzer IV. In fact, each shell took about 40% more space than the older KwK 40 rounds. While the Panzer IV Ausführung J could carry up to 87 shells, rough estimates suggest that a Schmalturm-equipped version could only hold about 55. As for secondary armament, the hull-mounted machine gun likely remained unchanged from the standard Panzer IV, an MG34 hull-mounted machine gun operated by the radio operator. So, what are we to make of this strange proposal? On paper, this tank packed a devastating punch. Its long-barreled gun could penetrate all Allied tanks, and the Schmalturm turret itself was well protected. But the rest of the vehicle told a different story. The hull armor maxed out at just 80mm, which was inadequate by late war standards. The added turret weight severely strained the already outdated suspension and drivetrain, resulting in a power-to-weight ratio of around 10 horsepower per ton, making the tank sluggish and underpowered. By the time this design was under consideration, the German military had already fielded a range of more practical alternatives, some of which also used the Panzer IV chassis, such as the Jagdpanzer IV. With its low profile and well-sloped armor, the Jagdpanzer IV was better suited to the ambush tactics the modified Panzer IV would have had to employ and was already in full production. All in all, while the Schmalturm offered better protection and firepower, integrating it into the Panzer IV chassis would have involved a number of compromises. It may have extended the life of the Panzer IV slightly, but only at the cost of significantly reduced reliability, agility, and simplicity. The very things that made the Panzer IV a success in the early years of the war. This concludes our video on the Panzer IV with the Schmalturm. What are your thoughts on it? Was it just a stopgap solution, or did it have any real prospects? Let us know in the comments below.